Hey everyone, welcome back to Reboot, GameSpot's opinion editorial show. I'm Mike Mahardy.
And I'm Jake Dekker.
And last week we put out a video about Metro Last Light. Metro Exodus was announced at Microsoft's press conference at E3 2017, and Metro Last Light, its predecessor, the second game in the soon-to-be trilogy, is one of my favorite games ever, and I think it's one of the better shooters ever made, although I think it's underappreciated. But we decided to look at that and then kind of look into how it continues the legacy of Half-Life 2 as far as narrative-driven first-person shooters go. I know back when they were kind of developing Last Light, they were talking about how they wanted to rekindle memories of Half-Life 2. So that's what started me on that idea of comparing those two games. I do think Half-Life 2 is a better game. We'll get into that more in the comments in a second in the Q&A section. But I do think it pushes forward that kind of game in an important way. A little bit under the radar game. Cool. Yeah, so let's jump right into questions and we can talk a little bit more about what we might want to cover in the future. But for now, Jake, I'll let you read the first question we got through Twitter.
First one was Space Cowboy, Spike Spiegel, and he actually is a fan of the show. He submitted a couple questions at this point.
Yeah, thank you.
But he says, not a big FPS fan, but there are a few exceptions. Wolfenstein, The New Order, Titanfall 2. Does Metro fall in this category? I think it falls in the category of Wolfenstein, The New Order. Maybe not Titanfall. However, Titanfall's still a really good shooter, but it's not a story-driven shooter, as you were mentioning before, like Wolfenstein is. And this game is definitely in the vein of story-based shooter.
Yeah, as far as Titanfall 2 goes, it has a fantastic campaign, but I don't play it for the story. I play it more for the design and the pacing, the actual ways it makes use of that movement from the pilots or the kind of mech combat in the Titans. But Wolfenstein: The New Order, I think, is a better example because, yeah, it's very story-driven. The pacing of Wolfenstein is a lot more arcadey. You're dual-wielding assault rifles and shotguns, and you are picking up health and whatnot. I would say if you're into more slower-paced shooters, like I think, again, Half-Life 2 is a good comparison. I would have to say, I don't know, something more like if you played BioShock in a really difficult setting, it might be more like that. There's the survival and there's the stealth kind of aspects, the blend of that. As you're kind of going through this linear yet like sandbox area focused games, you might like it. So yeah, Wolfenstein's a good example because it has those linear sections followed by these playground areas where you can kind of approach it through stealth, especially if you're playing the expansion, the Old Blood, but then kind of shift frantically to combat. And I think Metro Last Light does that in a great way, and also how you can manipulate your environment. So if you've been playing a lot of Titanfall 2, Metro will feel very, very slow to you.
Yes.
If you've been playing Wolfenstein, it might be more that speed, but more grounded story than Wolfenstein. Not as it's alternate history, but it's more future alternate history, if that makes sense. Post-apocalyptic. Played 2033, a fantastic game, not as polished at all. Once they got more backing from Koch Media, who bought the rights to it after the THQ dissolution, when once THQ realized that Metro Last Light was worth funding after this cult success of Metro 2033. It's weird to think about what 2033 would have been if they had the funding that the sequel did. Now Exodus looks like it's getting a ton of attention, which is great because I think they deserve it for a great developer that doesn't really get talked about too much. Cool.
Yeah, Exodus looks rad too.
So Spike Spiegel, thank you so much as usual for contributing. Okay, cool. Here on YouTube, I believe, right?
These are YouTube.
Mitch Former. Given that Metro Exodus will be borrowing heavily from the similarly themed Stalker games, do you think the former will in some way revitalize the latter's design and spirit? So yeah, initially Metro Exodus we thought was going to be an open world survival game a la Stalker, or like a more shooter-based Fallout. But they said it would be more in line with Last Light, kind of this more linear game. You're traveling from Moscow out to the outskirts, like away from the radiation, so you won't need a gas mask on the surface as much as I've heard, but that's beside the point. My point being, Stalker itself was this kind of big sandbox area, obviously in the shadow of Chernobyl, irradiated area, kind of survival-focused, more atmospheric, and Exodus is going to be more like Last Light, these linear sections followed by these sandboxes that they said. Like the demo they showed was this kind of dilapidated town where some of the Nosalises were attacking them in the tunnels before Artyom, we'll talk about that pronunciation in a second, where he emerged from the tunnels again. So it'll be more of like Uncharted does that same thing, linear, then these sandboxes, then linear, these sandboxes. Half-Life 2 did the same thing. I think in terms of spirit and atmosphere, it might allude to Stalker in many ways, which they've talked about. And it actually kind of got me thinking I want to go back and try Stalker out. Not polished what's in a lot of ways, but worth checking out. Shadow of Chernobyl, the first one, I believe, is probably my favorite of those. But I don't know, Jake, what do you think about what they're going for with Exodus? Are you interested in the game?
Yeah, I'm very interested in Exodus, and I think it just seems like it'll be a more polished, but a more ambitious version of Last Light in terms of, I think the areas you'll be able to explore are bigger, more you can interact with. Like even in that video, it looked like as Artyom was walking through, you could you could go inside the different houses and loot them, while I feel like the more expansive areas in Last Light weren't as detailed. There weren't as much to see and do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
They were getting like flack for saying that was in-game footage, and then people were like, no, that wasn't. I was like, yeah, that was PC footage. I think maybe that's what people thought. I think maybe it was like Windows 10 PC footage and not Xbox One X. Don't take my word for it. I'm not completely sure. But, and obviously it's kind of hard to tell because people for those demos play at a really slow pace. You wouldn't be like slowly looking when you're playing, so I don't know.
I do.
Yeah?
I do.
For good capture footage?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean like when you're just having fun. Whatever. Don't. Okay, cool. All right, Jake, you want to do the next one?
Yes, the next one comes from Crime from YouTube, and this isn't so much a question as it's just a comment on the episode overall. And he says, none of my friends believe me when I said that Metro Last Light brought feelings of Half-Life 2. A few years later, I see this video. I was right. Regarding other games, The Last Station brings some of those feelings. It is a 2D indie game, but it still takes me back in time to the atmosphere similar to Half-Life. I think that's interesting that other people also felt that same way, because I've never played the original Half-Life, or I've never played Half-Life 2. Don't kill me.
I wrote that episode, don't worry. I was the one who wrote that episode.
Yeah, he wrote that episode. I edited half of it.
Yeah.
So I believed him, but at the same time I was like, I don't know if everyone will agree, but it was kind of cool seeing that this guy felt the exact same way, and his friends apparently didn't believe him.
You can bring up my name in an argument now, because that solves everything. Yeah, no, I mean, again, it isn't a matter of opinion, but yeah, again, it was 4A themselves. I think it was a head of communications at the time. I forget. I don't think it's John. I don't think it's John who's heading it up
Krasinski.
now. No.
Okay.
Have you been watching a lot of The Office?
No.
Oh, that's the only John you could think of?
Yep.
All right. But
John Hamm.
But yes, they said like they wanted to rekindle memories of Half-Life 2. And, the BioShock has come out, BioShock 2, BioShock Infinite, any number of narrative-driven first-person shooters like Wolfenstein, although that is a little more arcadey than the ones I was talking about. Yeah, I really like that kind of game is being continued, that legacy of that game. And, Crime, I'm also glad you recommended The Last Station. I actually came across that in Steam recommendations and wasn't sure of it, but now that you mention it in relation to this video, I'll probably check it out. That is one thing we didn't mention in our kickoff episode for the season. Another thing that we would want to see in comments is game recommendations. A lot of people do recommend them, but definitely if you have something that relates to our last episode or something we might want to cover next episode, throw that at us. Like, it's one of the best things you can get is a good recommendation from people whose tastes you trust and everything. So thank you, Crime.
And finally, the last question. I think that's all you.
All right, Metro Last Light does continue the legacy of Half-Life 2 as a plot-driven first-person shooter, but I think it falls short in both level design and overall gameplay when compared to Half-Life 2. Metro does have great atmosphere, though. That was from Breadstick Gaming TV on YouTube.
Like I said, I haven't played Half-Life 2, so I can't really answer this question, but I figured it might be good for you to elaborate on your thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, I agree, Breadstick Gaming. I think Half-Life 2, in terms of level design, is on par with Last Light, actually. I like how Last Light modernizes those sandbox areas and actually incorporates stealth, whereas Half-Life 2 is just all-out shooter. In terms of atmosphere, I agree. Last Light, I think that atmosphere is even better than Half-Life 2. Although in 2004, when Half-Life 2 released from Valve, I think they made really good use of that, the Combine kind of dictatorship over, City 17 and the surrounding Eastern European countryside. I think they actually nailed that atmosphere with the technological limitations they had, as opposed to what 4A Games had with Last Light when they were working under THQ and then Koch Media and then, Deep Silver and everything publishing it. But overall gameplay, they are tough to compare because I did go into the stealth a little bit in Last Light. So they are, in terms of pacing, different games, but the pacing itself, the going through the story is similar in like how there's a vehicle section and then there's this kind of like slower section, then there's this more very tightly designed section. Like the bridges, I noticed like 3/4 of the way through the game, they both had this bridge that you kind of had to methodically move through. In Half-Life 2, you're fighting Combine soldiers. In Last Light, you're fighting Nosalises, those post-apocalyptic creatures. But I can ask you more about the actual level design of Last Light, but I do think Half-Life 2 is still the better game objectively. or not objectively, subjectively, because it's my opinion, but Last Light, I think, is still very, very underappreciated and one of the better shooters ever made in terms of how it uses the first-person shooter to tell a story and build a world where others might not. I think this builds a better world than BioShock Infinite, like, hands down.
Yeah, I agree. I think one key difference, though, you have to consider is that the Metro series was based on an already established universe from a book, while BioShock was, I guess, just from Ken Levine's head.
Yeah, sure.
BioShock Infinite. I think BioShock 1, that universe is pretty tough to compete with. But I think it definitely does. I think both games are head-to-head, I'd say. Yeah,
the variety of environments that you get from being underground solely is crazy. Like, you go into these towns that, like, are all, like, clapboard kind of 2x4 shanty towns, but then you go along this river they call Venice, like, ironically almost, and then you fight new enemies there. You go up to the surface, and it's, like, much harder to find your way around. Even, like, on Ranger mode, obviously, you could put your compass up, but the amount, and that contributes to the great pacing, right? The actual shift in tones and level design and kind of the approach to combat in each section. That game pulls me through so easily. I didn't really mention it in the episode, but that Red Square showdown with Pavel, I won't spoil it, but if you know what I'm talking about, oh my god, that is the biggest misstep in the game. I remember that being a pain. What was happening, especially on Ranger mode. I don't know who thought, they were trying to like introduce the wheel after they had already like perfected it the first 3/4 of the game, and then all of a sudden this happens. If you've played Last Light, you know what I'm talking about when you show down with Pavel. But anyway, yeah.
One thing I also like to is kind of an aside, but I liked how the lighter you could use as like a navigation device, like wherever the flame blue is where you could go.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, like in the tunnels, because you're trying to get out.
Get out. So
you can light cobwebs too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. Yeah, that game's fantastic. I already want to replay it. Get Redux on Steam. I'm not sure if it's still on sale as of the time you're viewing this, but it's well worth it. It's already a good value at its full price of like $20 or whatever for those two games now.
20 for both, right?
Yeah, and 2033 is upgraded with Last Light's visuals, and they're both like up-resed for modern like PCs or PS4 or Xbox One, whatever you want to play it on. But yeah, they're well worth playing. And Half-Life 2, you should get on that. It's still fun to play. I should probably play that. I replayed the whole thing alongside Last Light. It was a fun week for me in terms of research and capturing. Yeah, as I said, we aren't going to like tease our next episode as much. Still kind of hovering between two ideas right now. But I think this would be a good opportunity, now that we've done one episode this season, if you are a regular viewer and you want to go back and finish our earlier episodes and catch up, leave in the comments games that are going to be coming out later this summer or in the fall or early in the spring next year that you think you'd like me and Jake to look into and kind of like look at a different way that like reviewers might not, or people like is there a specific game like Last Light that is relevant now because Exodus got announced, or something like maybe with Far Cry 5 coming out in February, if we could look back at earlier Far Cries and kind of see where the series has gone, something like that. Anything. If you have any ideas like months down the road, give us ideas, because we have a huge list both of our ideas and just like fan suggested ideas. So we always appreciate that. That's the best part of the show. And obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube or GameSpot after the fact, we really appreciate you contributing like these people did today. And we'll be back.
Yeah, I just wanted to like give a shout out to a lot of people who I see like the same people in the comments almost every week, and it's really cool to see that. And then I think I've said it before too, but if you want a better chance of seeing your question on the show, it's easier to tweet it at us because it doesn't get buried as easily. Especially because both of us can see those if they're tweeted at us. So if like I miss it, he could catch it, or if he misses it, I could catch it. One or the other.
Yeah, more people did that last week, which was super helpful. Mm-hmm. It was a little easier to archive those questions and have them ready for the off-week episodes. But we will be back as usual next week. If you keep an eye on our Twitter accounts, we might be teasing it once we get closer. But until then, have a good week.
See ya.